30 years ago, the Earth ship Argonaut left Space Station Helios for a routine deep space exploration mission. It was supposed to be a simple journey charting unknown regions, collecting data, and returning within a year. But something strange happened. Halfway through their route, the Argonaut disappeared. One day the crew was sending regular updates, and the next, nothing. No signals. No emergency calls. Just silence. Earth Command launched search missions and scanned thousands of light-years around the last known location. They found no wreckage, no signs of a battle, no clues at all. The ship had simply vanished, like it had never existed. Over time, people moved on. The crew was declared lost, and the Argonaut became a mystery, a sad story, a ghost ship that lived only in whispers between cadets and pilots. But all that changed in one impossible moment. At exactly 700 hours Earth Central Time, an alert lit up across every military and civilian satellite in orbit. A vessel had entered Earth space without warning, directly inside a heavily restricted military zone. No ship could have done that. Earth's defense grid was advanced and impossible to sneak past. Alarms screamed, defense platforms armed weapons, and battle-ready fleets were scrambled. Yet the ship didn't fire. It simply floated there, silent, calm, and unshaken. When scanners locked on, the name printed on the hull made no sense. Argonaut. The exact same ship, same ID codes, same structure. But it looked brand new. No damage, no aging, no wear. Like it had launched only yesterday. Commanders didn't believe it at first. They thought it was a trick, a stolen identity, or some advanced mimic tech. But when they boarded the ship, everything changed. The corridors of the Argonaut were clean and operational. The lights flickered on as if expecting them. Systems responded perfectly to Earth codes. And then the crew was found. Every one of them alive. The same 100 people who had vanished decades ago. They hadn't aged a single day. Their clothes, their memories, their voices, nothing had changed. It was as if no time had passed for them, while Earth had grown 30 years older. Medical teams ran scans, and the results were shocking. The crew's bodies were enhanced. Their cells didn't decay. Their minds were sharper than any human ever recorded. Yet none of them claimed to understand what had happened. The leader of the team, Commander Elaine Voss, stood at the center of the control deck, completely calm. When asked where they had been, she gave a simple answer: "We went forward, and then we went beyond." No one knew what that meant. Interrogators pressed, scientists questioned, but the crew only smiled gently and said the same thing. They refused to give further details. But the tech on board began to tell a different story. The computers inside the Argonaut were no longer human-made. Their architecture didn't match any known design. Some parts weren't even metal. They were made of strange materials that changed shape when scanned. One object looked like a simple cube, but when touched, it became a full map of the galaxy, including regions no probe had ever reached. Another machine seemed to heal a soldier's deep wound in seconds without leaving a scar. Whatever had touched the Argonaut had gifted it something beyond anything Earth had ever seen. Panic spread in high command. Some feared the crew had been taken over by alien forces. Others believed they had found a lost civilization. Rumors of body snatchers and cosmic parasites ran wild through the ranks. But still, no harm came from the ship or its crew. They were polite, respectful, and followed Earth protocols without hesitation. Yet the mystery only deepened. The ship's logs had been wiped. No records of what had happened between their last signal and now. Only one recording remained: a short message from Voss's voice saying, "We were chosen. And now we return." That message played on loop in the captain's quarters, and no one could delete it. In secret, Earth's top scientists tried to reverse engineer the tech on board, but nothing made sense. One machine melted when they removed it from the ship, reforming only when placed back. A scanning drone was absorbed by a wall and never returned. The Argonaut had become more than a ship. It was a puzzle, maybe even a warning. Commander Voss finally requested to speak to Earth's highest authority in person. When the meeting was approved, she walked into the chamber with calm confidence. "We didn't just vanish," she said. "We were taken, tested, and taught. What we brought back is not just for us, it's for all of humanity. But only if you're ready." Her words were clear, but her eyes told a deeper truth. She had seen something so vast, so powerful, that human language struggled to describe it. The leaders demanded answers. Where had they gone? Who had taken them? What was this technology? But she smiled again and simply replied, "You wouldn't believe me yet, but you will soon." Then she handed over a single device, small, metallic, glowing softly. "This is the first key," she said. "Use it wisely." As the session ended, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The Argonaut had returned, not as a relic of the past, but as a messenger of something far greater, something hidden in the stars. And though the crew would not speak, their eyes held knowledge that reached beyond galaxies. Earth was standing on the edge of a truth it didn't yet understand. And somewhere out there in the darkness, something was watching, waiting. And it had chosen humanity for a reason. After the Argonaut's shocking return, Earth Command quickly realized the situation was far more complex than a missing ship coming home. The vessel had not only reappeared unharmed, but brought with it knowledge and technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. But it wasn't just the ship that had changed, the crew was different too. On the surface, they looked the same, smiled the same, and wore the same uniforms they had 30 years ago. But doctors, scientists, and psychologists soon noticed something strange. Their vitals were perfect, too perfect. Heart rates, brain activity, and muscle responses were operating beyond the limits of human potential. Some of the crew had no scars where old injuries were once recorded. A few no longer needed glasses, hearing aids, or medical implants. And most puzzling of all, their cells didn't age. Scans showed the biological age of every crew member as exactly the same as when they'd vanished. It wasn't natural. It wasn't possible. Yet it was happening right in front of them. When questioned, the crew answered politely but carefully. They refused to reveal specific information about where they had been. Not because they didn't want to, but because they claimed that humanity wasn't ready to know the full truth. Commander Elaine Voss led every conversation with quiet confidence, choosing her words with precision. "We were given something precious," she said more than once, "and with that comes responsibility." Military leaders grew nervous. Intelligence officers pushed harder. But the crew never cracked. They communicated like a single mind, each member supporting the others, never breaking formation, always one step ahead of every question. Some began to whisper that this wasn't just a crew, it was something more. Something united in a way no normal human team could be. As investigations deepened, Earth's top scientists focused on the technology recovered from the Argonaut. One device looked like a data core, but could store infinite information in a space smaller than a grain of sand. Another was a floating orb that responded to thoughts, changing color and shape based on emotion. But it was the medical equipment that truly shocked everyone. A scanning bed inside the ship could detect every flaw in the human body and correct it in minutes without a single incision. Cancer, disease, even genetic defects vanished under its touch. The crew insisted the tech should be used for good, but only under their guidance. They warned that using it too early, without understanding, could cause damage beyond repair. This only increased suspicion among Earth's leaders. Why hold back such power? What were they hiding? Some believed the crew had made a deal with alien forces. Others feared they were now something entirely new, no longer fully human. Tension grew within Earth Command. A secret meeting was held to discuss the possibility of detaining the Argonaut's crew and taking full control of the ship and its tech. But when an elite extraction team boarded the vessel during a midnight operation, they found themselves completely shut down. The ship had sealed itself before they entered, locking doors with an energy no weapon could break. Their weapons were disabled the moment they crossed the threshold. Monitors displayed peaceful warnings. This is not the way. Then, without harming anyone, the ship released a pulse that gently pushed every soldier back to the docking bay. The Argonaut had defended itself not with violence, but with intelligence far beyond anything Earth had built. After that, fear turned into quiet panic. The crew didn't retaliate. They didn't complain. Instead, they requested a peaceful audience with Earth scientists, offering to begin teaching small concepts from what they'd learned. Commander Voss called it the beginning of a new path. But her words were always wrapped in layers, truth hidden within riddles, hope wrapped in mystery. "We saw the shape of time," she once said. "We learned what awaits us beyond fear." But understanding it requires more than curiosity. It requires change. Her crew nodded silently, always together, always calm, like monks guarding a powerful secret. One young scientist, Dr. Lexa Hahn, dared to build trust with them. She spent weeks interviewing low-ranking crew members, not as an interrogator, but as a listener. Slowly, one of the engineers, Marcus J., revealed small hints. He spoke of a place outside of space, where thought has weight and time is not a line. He described being tested by a presence that felt ancient, endless, and kind. He said they had all been shown visions of what could come of galactic civilizations rising and falling, of a coming event that would change everything. "They didn't just teach us," he said. "They prepared us for something no one else can see yet." When Lexa asked why they returned, he looked at her with deep sadness. "Because we are the warning." The meaning of those words spread quickly across command centers and scientific halls. Were they trying to help? Or were they the first wave of something bigger? Rumors reached the public. News leaks described immortal astronauts, alien healers, and unstoppable machines. People began to speculate about the crew. Some saw them as heroes, others feared them as threats. But the truth remained unclear. The Argonaut sat peacefully in orbit, its system silent unless touched by one of the original crew. No outsider could activate anything. And the crew remained on board, waiting patiently, watching quietly, always offering help, but never forcing it. Then came the most shocking moment yet. One evening, without warning, every screen on Earth, civilian and military alike, flashed white for a brief second. A symbol appeared, not from Earth, not from any known species. Just a circle with a line cutting through it, followed by 5 words in perfect English. "They are not what you think." It lasted only 3 seconds, and then it vanished. No origin, no trace. But it was enough to stir fear across the planet. Earth Command locked down all channels. Investigations launched, but the crew of the Argonaut remained calm. They denied sending the message. When asked, Voss only said, "Now you see what we are facing." Earth stood at crossroads. The crew who had vanished were back, but they were no longer just explorers. They had become something else. Guardians of a secret. Carriers of knowledge. And maybe, just maybe, the last hope for a future no one understood yet. Whether they were trusted or feared, one thing was certain: they knew too much. And that knowledge would either save the world or break it. The silence in the command center was heavier than ever before. Ever since the strange symbol appeared on every screen, just a circle split by a single line, followed by the chilling sentence, "They are not what you think," the world had changed. Earth's most powerful computers failed to trace the source. No signal origin. No energy spike. No foreign code. Just a brief flash, and then nothing, as if the message had always existed inside the machines, waiting for the right moment to be seen. Panic rippled through military and scientific communities, while the public was gripped by a mix of fear, awe, and wild speculation. Some believed it was a warning against the Argonaut's crew, while others saw it as a threat from something even greater. Despite all the noise, the returned crew remained calm, their silence louder than any words. Commander Elaine Voss refused interviews and closed all contact with Earth Command. Her last message, transmitted with eerie clarity, simply said, "We are not your enemies. But we are no longer alone." Inside the Global Analysis Facility buried under Iceland's frozen surface, Dr. Lexa Hahn sat alone in her lab, staring at the strange symbol. She'd been obsessed with its design, simple, elegant, but deeply disturbing. She'd seen something similar in the private notes of one of the Argonaut engineers during her early interviews, a doodle-marked vision fragment. Now it was showing up everywhere, etched into walls by panicked civilians, replicated in online communities, even drawn unknowingly by children. She believed it wasn't just a message, it was a language. Something ancient. Something universal. That night, as she adjusted her sleep monitor and laid her head down, her dreams turned strange. She saw the symbol burning in the sky and heard a voice, soft and powerful, whispering in a language she couldn't understand yet somehow felt. When she woke up, her room was dark, but her computer screen was glowing. A message waited for her. You hear? They do not. Come alone. She froze. No sender. No timestamp. No network activity. She didn't know who or what had sent it, but she felt something pull at her thoughts, a gravity beyond logic. The next day, Lexa followed the instructions, quietly boarding a shuttle and flying alone to the Argonaut. She had clearance, but no one stopped her or even asked where she was going. It was like the ship itself had allowed her passage. As her craft docked, the Argonaut powered up for the first time in days. Lights flickered to life, and the docking bay doors opened before she touched the controls. The ship greeted her with silence, no crew in sight, only the soft hum of machines that seemed to awaken at her presence. She walked carefully through the corridors, heart pounding, surrounded by walls that whispered without sound. Then, in the heart of the ship, she found a chamber that had never shown up in blueprints or scans. It was spherical, glowing with soft blue light, and in its center floated the same symbol, only now it moved, spinning slowly like a living thought. The walls shimmered with patterns that shifted based on her emotions. When she stepped inside, her thoughts became images, memories, questions, fears, all projected around her. A voice spoke, not with sound, but directly into her mind. We are the ones who listen between stars. We do not create. We observe. And you have touched what must not be touched. Lexa felt no fear, only a strange calm. She asked who they were, what they wanted, why they had shown the message. The answer came not in words, but in feeling ancient sorrow, deep warning. Then finally, a sentence she could understand. The crew carries knowledge meant for a time beyond yours. If taken too early, it will break you. As she stood there, overwhelmed, she saw flashes of what the crew had seen, visions of dying galaxies, collapsing civilizations, and powerful beings made of light and time. She saw how the Argonaut had been caught in a rift outside reality, where space bent like water and thought created matter. She saw how the crew had passed tests set by these watchers, trials of logic, emotion, and unity. And for passing those trials, they had been given gifts, not just technology, but understanding. The crew had returned changed, connected to something vast. But they weren't alone. Something else had followed, a presence that wasn't evil, but ancient and deeply cautious. The message to Earth had come from this presence, a reminder that even knowledge has limits. Lexa understood now. The warning wasn't against the crew. It was against those who might misuse what they had brought home. Earth wasn't ready for the truth because it still saw power as a weapon, not as a responsibility. When Lexa emerged from the chamber, the crew was waiting. Commander Voss met her with a calm nod, as if everything had gone exactly as expected. Now you know, she said softly. Lexa looked around at the crew, still human, but not just human. They were guardians now, chosen not by strength, but by their willingness to protect something bigger than themselves. Voss placed a hand on Lexa's shoulder. They showed you because you listened. The real message isn't a warning, it's a test. The question is whether humanity will pass. Lexa nodded, still shaken, but no longer afraid. She knew what had to be done. She returned to Earth with a different mind, carrying not just answers, but the burden of what she'd seen. She couldn't reveal everything. Not yet. But she could guide the world slowly, carefully, toward the path that had been offered. Meanwhile, the symbol continued to appear across the planet, not in terror now, but as a quiet reminder that something was watching. Something waiting. Not to control, but to see if humanity was ready to take its next step, not with fear, but with wisdom. Even after the secret chamber in the Argonaut revealed its message, Earth's leaders were divided. Some wanted to protect the knowledge, while others grew desperate to control it. Fear began to grow in the shadows of power, not because of the message itself, but because of what it meant that humans were no longer the most advanced force in their own story. Behind closed doors, military generals, corporate tycoons, and high-ranking officials whispered about losing control. Commander Elaine Voss and her crew were seen not as heroes anymore, but as a dangerous variable, a wild card holding knowledge that could rewrite the laws of science and shift global power. A secret council was formed to watch the Argonaut and, if needed, to act before the crew could share anything that might disrupt the balance. That fear led to something darker. One cold night, deep inside Earth's orbital defense station, a silent figure in an unmarked suit uploaded a hidden program into the communication relay. No one noticed. The signal was slow, subtle, and laced with silent commands designed to confuse the ship's systems. Within hours, the Argonaut began to behave strangely. Lights flickered, artificial gravity fluctuated, and core logs were corrupted. The crew noticed the changes immediately, but they also noticed something more terrifying. The sabotage wasn't just mechanical, it was intelligent. The ship wasn't simply failing, it was being attacked from the inside. Elaine gathered her crew in the command center, faces grim and tense. Her chief engineer reported missing files and invisible code rewriting their navigation logs. Her medical officer complained of life support readings being altered mid-scan. But most disturbing of all, her pilot found a second voice in their transmissions, something mimicking crew voices, whispering false orders in the middle of the night. Someone or something was trying to make them doubt each other. The trust between the crew, once unbreakable, began to crack. Suspicions spread slowly, like a disease. Old arguments were remembered, strange glances exchanged, and innocent mistakes suddenly looked like sabotage. Elaine struggled to keep control, reminding them that whatever was happening wasn't coming from within, but from outside. Still, doubt lingered. Then, the first real betrayal happened. A hidden subroutine triggered a false emergency that forced one of the escape pods to launch without permission. No one admitted responsibility. The logs were wiped clean. The pod vanished into space, empty or so they believed. But hours later, the crew received a strange audio signal, a whispering voice that said only one thing: "You were warned." We watched the watchers. The crew was shaken, but Elaine stood firm. She knew now that this wasn't just sabotage by humans who feared them, there was another player involved. Something that had followed them back from that place beyond space, watching silently until the moment to strike had come. Back on Earth, Dr. Lexa Hahn began to piece together the clues. She compared the corrupted signals on the Argonaut with the data from the strange symbol that had first appeared. A horrifying pattern emerged. The sabotage code didn't match any Earth language or machine syntax. It was something else entirely, a logic that behaved more like thought than program. It was adaptive, like a living virus with a goal. Lexa realized too late that someone on Earth had tried to hack the ship using their own tools, but had unknowingly invited something alien into their systems. In their fear to control the unknown, they had opened a door they couldn't close. Lexa rushed to warn the command council, but they ignored her. Instead, they activated a secret protocol, Project Blackout. Its mission was simple: shut down the Argonaut permanently and seize any surviving crew for containment and study. The ship was declared a threat to planetary security. Earth's most powerful weapons were turned toward the stars. In orbit, as Earth's fleet approached, the Argonaut remained silent, lights dim, systems cold, but inside, something stirred. The crew, now fully aware of the sabotage, had found a backup message in the hidden chamber. It wasn't from Earth, and it wasn't friendly. The message spoke of an ancient intelligence that lived in the shadows between galaxies, a being that punished those who reached too far, too fast. It was a guardian or a jailer. And now, because of Earth's fear and betrayal, it had been awakened. As the first warning shots from Earth's fleet grazed the outer shields, Elaine made a final decision. She ordered all systems shut down except for the core chamber and led her crew inside. The chamber responded to their presence, glowing brighter, humming with energy. Lexa's voice came through the comms, breaking protocol to warn them about Project Blackout and the ancient force. "They've made a mistake," she whispered. They don't understand what they've unleashed. Elaine answered only with a nod. Then the chamber reacted not violently, but peacefully. A soft pulse spread from its center, disabling all incoming weapons without firing a single shot. Earth's fleet froze in space, their systems confused and overwhelmed. The ancient force spoke once more, a voice of wind and silence. You were warned. Now you will watch. The Argonaut vanished in a burst of light, not destroyed, not captured, just gone. The silence that followed was unlike anything Earth had heard before. No debris, no signal, only emptiness where the ship had been. The fleet returned, confused and shaken. On Earth, governments denied everything. Lexa disappeared. The symbol faded from screens, but the feeling remained, lingering in minds and dreams that someone was still watching, waiting, and measuring whether Earth was ready for what came next. After the disappearance of the Argonaut, Earth was silent not just in space, but in thought. The world's leaders, who had once argued over dominance, now faced a silence too deep to ignore. They had fired on their own heroes. They had triggered an unknown force. And now, they were being watched by something far beyond their understanding. Satellites failed without warning, strange signals echoed through deep space, and ancient machines buried under the oceans began to hum with energy that no one remembered building. Fear became a shadow on every conference table. Across the planet, people sensed a change. Not through words, but through instinct. Dreams became strange and vivid, and many woke up with images they could not explain, symbols, voices, and visions of stars that didn't match any known sky. Dr. Lexa Hahn, who had gone into hiding after warning the Argonaut crew, resurfaced with a message she had decoded from the alien technology. It was not a threat, not a demand, but a test. The ancient force had given Earth one last chance, a simple but heavy choice: grow together or fall apart. Humanity would not be destroyed, not yet. Instead, they were given a mirror, a chance to see themselves clearly and decide what came next. Lexa gathered the brightest minds and warned them that whatever power existed beyond the stars had already judged Earth once and would not wait forever. The message was clear: evolve your nature or stay trapped in your own fear and destruction. It was humanity's choice. The message spread like fire. Nations paused their endless competition, and ordinary people began to ask questions they had never dared before. Why do we fear knowledge? Why do we turn on our own? Across media and classrooms, in war rooms and quiet homes, one question echoed above all. What if the Argonaut had returned not to warn us, but to offer us something greater? That question reached deeper than any speech or law. Movements began to rise, not for power, but for understanding. Scientists opened their labs to the public. Militaries reduced their activity, replaced by missions of peace and exploration. The strange technology left behind by the Argonaut, a glowing cube recovered near the moon's orbit, was no longer seen as a weapon, but as a gift. It displayed visions of possible futures, each shaped by different human choices. One showed Earth united, stepping into the stars, peaceful and curious. Another showed fire, war, and silence, an empty planet left behind by civilizations that chose better. Lexa warned that the cube didn't predict the future, it only showed reflections of the path humanity might take. And the more they studied it, the more they realized one chilling truth: the ancient force wasn't just watching, it was waiting for Earth to either rise or repeat its mistakes. Amid all this, the crew of the Argonaut returned, but not in the way anyone expected. They didn't land in ships or send a signal. They appeared in visions, in dreams, in the memories of those who had known them. Commander Elaine Voss stood in one such vision before a global peace summit, silent but powerful, surrounded by stars. She held no weapon, only light, and behind her were beings of strange beauty, tall, glowing figures, part machine, part life, as if born from the universe itself. She didn't speak, but her eyes told a story of sacrifice, of a journey that had crossed time and space. People around the world saw the same dream, and though no one could explain it, everyone understood the crew had become something more, something between human and myth, guardians of a future they could no longer return to, but hoped their people still might reach. Governments could no longer deny the truth. The choice was here, not tomorrow. Now. A final meeting between the last standing leaders of Earth, held not in secrecy, but streamed to every screen on the planet. The decision was made. Not by vote, not by command, but by voice. A young girl from a refugee camp stood before them, holding a drawing of the Argonaut flying above a united Earth. She asked one simple question: if they believed in us, why don't we believe in ourselves? The room fell silent. No argument remained. One by one, the leaders stood and pledged a new course. Not of control, but of cooperation. Not of war, but of wonder. The world was still broken, but now it had a direction. The cube responded that night. Its surface shimmered, and for the first time, it opened. Inside was a map, not of space, but of connection. It showed where new technology could heal the oceans, where knowledge could grow food from dust, where energy could be drawn without harm. It was not magic, it was earned. It had waited for the right choice. In the end, humanity didn't conquer space with weapons. They opened the stars with unity. The ancient force never returned with fire because it didn't need to. Its message had been delivered. And though the crew of the Argonaut never came home, they had shown what was possible not by winning a war, but by forcing humanity to look at itself and choose something better. And in the quiet sky above, where stars still whispered their secrets, a new kind of ship began to rise. Not for war, not for power, but for the journey. The journey of a species that had finally learned to listen.